Get off the mat. Lady, you don't belong here. That's what they told her, right before she dropped a 210-pound fighter with one clean. Silent move. She didn't shout, didn't argue, just stood back up and let her training do the talking. But this story isn't about revenge. It's about what happens when a woman refuses to be erased, and the entire gym learns that control is stronger than muscle. Stay with us. Because the moment she stood tall, every voice that mocked her went silent. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Alive Stories. Today's story is about a simple woman who was laughed at by a 200 lbs fighter until she dropped him cold with one hit. Let's get started. Dallas, Texas, 7:00 a.m. No one noticed the woman walking through the doors of Iron Pit MMA gym. She wore a light gray hoodie, long sweatpants, and worn-out running shoes. No logos. Nothing about her looked like a pro fighter. She signed in for the combat control, intermediate class, grabbed a badge, and walked straight into the main training zone, where heavyweight fighters were warming up with shadowboxing. The sound of gloves pounding heavy bags mixing with loud heavy metal music. Her name was Nora Bennett, and she was 42 years old. But no one there knew that. All they saw was a quiet, middle-aged woman who didn't fit the scene. And the first to speak up was Dustin Craig, a well-known Texas fighter, over 6'3", 210 pounds, bleached blonde hair, and arms like steel beams. He had just finished a hook on the heavy bag when he turned and said loudly, "Somebody get her a yoga mat." A few nearby laughed. Someone whistled. Nora didn't turn around. She was unzipping her gym bag, pulling out an old pair of black gloves. The wraps inside were worn, but folded neatly, like new. Dustin didn't stop. "Lady, I'm serious, you lost. This ain't Pilates, this is real contact. Real pain." No one stepped in. A few people pulled out their phones. They thought they were about to catch a funny little morning moment. Nora stood up, tightened her gloves, and looked toward the largest heavy bag. She didn't say a word. Dustin stepped in front of her, blocking her path, close enough for her to smell the mix of synthetic protein and bloated ego in his breath. "You got a waiver sign? Miss Bennett, you're about to enter live drills with fighters who actually hit back." Nora looked at him. Her gaze wasn't cold, wasn't proud, just honest, like she was weighing whether a reply was even worth it. She gently pulled up the left sleeve of her hoodie halfway up her arm, revealing a faded tattoo, barely legible, but clear enough for those who knew the insignia of a U.S. Army Ground Combat Command unit. Dustin scoffed. "Oh, I see. We got a war hero. Thank you for your service, ma'am. But this here is a different kind of battlefield." No one said anything. They were just waiting to see how she'd respond. But Nora didn't argue. She didn't challenge. She didn't defend herself. She just said, quietly but clearly, "You might want to stretch first." Dustin raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me, because if you come at me stiff like that," she said, eyes glancing down at his heavy footwork, "you're going down before your ego knows what happened." The laughter in the room faded, as if no one was sure whether this was still a joke. Nora stepped lightly past him. No shove, no sidestep. He let her pass, but kept watching, and the whole room watched with him. And suddenly, it didn't seem funny anymore. They still thought she'd be taught a lesson. They just didn't know who really needed to learn Nora Bennett wasn't new to pressure. She had lived in places where everything could explode just because of an empty can on the roadside, where nights had no ceiling, only a silent ski and wind screaming through dust, where a single misstep didn't just mean death, it meant your team might never make it back. But in Dallas, Texas, no one knew that. She lived in a one-bedroom apartment on the third floor of an old building on the city's south side. No elevator, no luxuries, just a faded couch, a small kitchen, and a wooden box hidden under the bed, holding things never put on display, campaign medals, handwritten letters from fallen comrades, and a tarnished silver dog tag engraved with her husband's name, SSG James Bennett. Nora had once been a staff sergeant in the U.S. Army, a close-quarters tactical coordinator, 13 years of service, 3 deployments to conflict zones. She didn't like to talk about it, not because she was ashamed, but because she believed that the things that truly matter are usually the ones that don't need to be said out loud. After James was killed in a device explosion in Kandahar, Nora quietly left the military. No headlines, no televised tears. She just submitted her exit paperwork, packed her things, and left the base on a rainy April afternoon, carrying only a photo of him in his last uniform, still smelling faintly of gunpowder. People say time heals all wounds, but Nora knew some wounds don't heal. They just stop bleeding, long enough for you to stand up, breathe, and live as if you're not still hurting. She became a physical therapist at a rehab center for veterans. Most of her clients carried scars, both visible and hidden, and with them, Nora never needed to say she had once been a soldier. They could tell from how she guided their breathing, from how she steadied their hands when they tried a movement for the first time after trauma, from how she listened in silence, as if she had just come from the same place they had. But even though the work helped others, she still felt like a blade kept too long in a drawer, dulled, numb, losing its sense of edge. That was why she started training again. Not to fight, but to remember what it felt like to be in control of her own body, to know she could push back if she had to exist on her own terms, not boxed in as the widow, the recovering vet, the one who should be moving on. It began with a few shadowboxing moves each morning in the apartment courtyard, then running. Then she adapted heavier drills from old military manuals. One day, while adjusting the posture of a male patient, a former Marine recovering from shoulder surgery, he looked at her and said, "Ma'am, with the way you read movement, MMA might suit you better than this clinic." She laughed, but the words stuck in her mind like an anchor. 3 months later, she showed up at Iron Pit. No one knew she had once used her bare hands to disarm a gunman trying to pull a grenade pin inside a shelter at Al Udeid. No one knew she had led 5 people out of a surrounded zone with only a knife and a hand-drawn map on a sandbag. No one knew because she had never told them, and she didn't intend to. Because what brought her to that mat wasn't the need to prove her past. It was the need to prove this: she was still here. She still had strength, and no one had the right to take that from her just because they couldn't see it. They called her Auntie Bennett from the very first week. At first, it sounded like a joke, half teasing, half familiar. But the tone, the way they emphasized Auntie like they were announcing a lost middle-aged woman on the fight floor, carried layers of meaning that didn't need to be said aloud. You don't belong here, you're not one of us, and we don't see you as part of this space. The male fighters at Iron Pit, especially those who followed Dustin, seemed to see Nora as a glitch in the system, a screening error. They didn't hit her with fists, but with 1,000 small acts repeated often enough to wear down anyone's patience. On her third training session, Nora laid out her grappling mat in advance. Someone moved it, replacing it with heavier gear, and claimed they didn't see anyone using it. In the next session, her gloves disappeared from the shelf. When she asked, a young fighter grinned. Maybe they ran away. Self-defense reflex. The group laughed. They always laughed. There were no punches, just traps that forced you to choose between silence or walking away. Nora chose silence. Dustin, of course, was the axis of it all. He didn't need to say much, just a look, just standing close enough to make clear this is the boundary. When he laughed at a mistake Nora made, the whole class laughed too. When he redirected a joke toward her, the other women stayed silent. Some gave nervous laughs, not out of amusement, but survival. They knew the rule: laugh and stay, or resist and get replaced. One day, Nora caught the eyes of Kayla, a younger student who had once gotten her shoulder nearly wrenched by Dustin during a drill. Kayla met her gaze, then quickly looked down. No one stood near anyone too long. No one wanted to be dragged in. When Nora reported being consistently left out of partner drills, the head coach, who was also the gym manager, just shrugged. This is a male-dominant space. Nora, it's competitive. Don't take it personally. Then he turned away to continue coaching those with tournament potential. They called it brotherhood culture. Said if she couldn't take that heat, she couldn't handle a real fight. But this wasn't fighting. It was a kind of behavior she'd seen before in the military, a protective layer for people threatened by difference, who use group personality to shield their fragile egos. One afternoon, Dustin asked Nora to be his demo partner for an armbar release drill, a move that required controlled strength and accuracy. She agreed as they stepped onto the mat. Dustin leaned close and whispered, "Don't worry, Auntie. I'll go easy on the joints." But as soon as the cue began, he cranked her wrist hard, then wrenched her shoulder in the opposite direction, with enough force to send any less trained fighter to the ER. Nora gritted her teeth, didn't scream, but her arm was visibly bruised. No one in the group mentioned it. When class ended, someone clapped Dustin on the back. "That was clean. Man, she needs to learn anyway." The following week, a local blog ran a short post. Headline: When Instagram fighters invade real gyms, the age of pretenders. No names were mentioned, but the thumbnail was a woman in a light gray workout outfit practicing jabs. Someone who looked a lot like Nora. Under the post, one fighter shared it with the caption, "Spot anyone familiar?" Nora didn't react. She didn't report the post or ask for it to be taken down. But she quietly exited all Iron Pit group chats. She also started arriving later and leaving earlier. At night, back home, she rolled out her old mat in the living room. She opened the tactical notebook she once used on active duty, ran through every sequence from muscle memory, sit-up counters, seated escape drills, elbow release techniques. She still remembered. It was all still there. Her body just needed reminding. One night, while massaging her shoulder with a cold roller, Nora touched her husband's dog tag, still hanging beside her desk, and remembered something he once said during their last rainy season training. "The hardest part isn't hitting back. It's standing still in a crowd that wants to see you fall and not giving them that moment." She knew Dustin was trying to reach that moment, but what he didn't know was that she had lived through worse, many times, and each time, she chose not to run. She just stepped back, trained harder, and waited for the right moment. There's a kind of fight that doesn't use fists. Nora understood that better than anyone. After nearly 2 months enduring subtle discrimination and quiet exclusion at Iron Pit, she didn't respond with confrontation or formal complaints. Instead, she watched, silently, patiently, precisely, in the mornings. She arrived earlier than usual, when the lights in the gym were still halfway on. She warmed up in silence, eyes scanning the movements of others, the way Kyle always leaned his hips during defense, Chelsea's clumsy footwork when cornered, and how Dustin masked exhaustion with louder laughter after every hard set. She remembered everything, not to retaliate, but because she had been trained to spot what others missed. And it's often those details that decide who stands and who falls. At Iron Pit, no one truly saw Nora. They saw a woman in her late 30s, wearing a gray t-shirt and old sweatpants. They saw a widow, a woman whose husband died in combat, now trying to start over. They saw a shadow, and they thought that was enough to define her. But what no one asked was why she stayed. Nora didn't need to prove anything. She didn't need to be noticed. All she wanted was a space quiet enough to rebuild what society had quietly stolen from her. The feeling of bodily agency, the ability to use her body as a tool of defense, of attack, of survival. One Friday afternoon, with the gym nearly empty, Dustin walked past while she was drilling. No words were exchanged, but his gaze lingered longer than usual. He saw her sweep, clean enough to drop any heavier opponent off balance. He didn't compliment, didn't smirk, just paused. For half a beat, Nora knew he'd begun to feel it, that something was shifting. And in that moment, she started challenging him, not by striking back, but by staying. Her silence began to unravel the system around Dustin. The jokes lost their sting when the target didn't react. The eyes that once looked at her with quiet contempt started showing something else: curiosity and caution. She still didn't speak, but her behavior, her consistency, her precision in every drill, her perfect balance during push kicks and elbow strikes, began to unsettle the room. Because if the person they once dismissed as not belonging here didn't quit, kept showing up, and visibly improved, then maybe the problem wasn't her. She didn't need defenders. She didn't need applause each night after work. Nora quietly opened James's old notebook, reread his notes on tactical defense, and logged her own progress. No one saw it, but every jab, every tight clinch, every session, She powered through despite shoulder pain, was living proof she wasn't here to decorate anyone's doubt, and her silence was gaining weight. One morning, Kayla, the same woman who once avoided Nora like she feared being guilty by association, approached after training and asked quietly, "That sweep you did earlier, can you show me sometime?" Nora just smiled, nodded, no promises, no conditions. But that one small gesture was enough to know the old structure had started to crack. Iron Pit hosted its in-house tournament in early March. They called it March Clash, a showdown between in-gym fighters meant to promote the academy and attract premium members. The event was run more professionally than usual. A new mat was laid down. Guest judges were invited from partner academies, and cameras were hired to live stream the fights on YouTube. Dustin, of course, headlined the roster. His name was bold on the posters, undisputed striker, shown in a profile shot with his chin angled high in pride. The organizers scheduled him for the final main event of the day. But before that, a few exhibition matches would be held, technical sparring showcases between students from different classes, to build momentum. Nora received an email from the organizers saying she had been selected for one such match, a light sparring showcase against a mid-level male student. Not Dustin, just a technical exchange. 2 rounds, 2 minutes each. No official scoring, no knockouts. The goal, as they phrased it, was to encourage skill diversity in the student community. Part of her wanted to decline, not out of fear, but because she recognized it for what it was, a setup. They were placing her in the most vulnerable position possible under the spotlight, in front of the cameras, where every flaw could be magnified and shared. But another part of her, the part that had stayed silent for far too long, nodded quietly. She sent her response in 9 words. "Thank you for the opportunity. I accept with respect. For the next 2 weeks." Nora said nothing to anyone, but her training shifted to 6:00 a.m. Before the others arrived, she had already completed full technical sets, cardio rounds, and close quarters defense drills. She didn't train faster. She trained a cleaner, and she knew that was enough. On the day of the March Clash, Iron Pit was packed like never before. Families of fighters filled the bleachers. Extra rows of chairs were set up. Banners, branded shirts, name boards. It had all looked like a semi-pro tournament. Dustin entered like a celebrity, chin raised, red robe trimmed in black, carried by one of the younger coaches. He walked past Nora without looking, but she caught the corner of his lip curling up. She understood instantly. The person she had been matched with was him. There was no full name announcement. The organizers simply called Match 4, Showcase Bout. 2-minute rounds, light contact, technical format. Please welcome Bennett versus Walsh. The crowd didn't react right away, but those who followed the training sessions began to murmur. Nora stepped out, not in flashy gear, a long-sleeved black shirt, unbranded workout pants, hair tied low, gloves snug, and for the first time at Iron Pit, clearly visible around her neck, a pair of worn silver dog tags, etched with the names of 2 people no longer in this world, her husband, and the comrade who fell beside him in an ambush in Marja. She stepped into the ring. The lights hit her face. She didn't blink. Dustin smiled. He raised his hand to the crowd like it was a theater, a female opponent, a decade older. No wins in previous drills, a technical demo, the perfect excuse for humiliation. The ref signaled to begin. Dustin closed in almost immediately. No opening jab. He faked rhythm, then launched a roundhouse kick toward Nora's side. A fast enough strike to drop someone unprepared. But Nora didn't step back. She angled her body precisely 12 degrees, left hand shielding her chest, right wrist flicking into position. She caught his shin, and in under 3 seconds, Dustin lost balance. Before the crowd could process what happened, Nora rotated through a center shift, sending Dustin spinning midair and crashing down on his shoulder. Then his back. His heels slapped the mat with a heavy thud. He didn't get up immediately. Eyes wide, stunned by the impact. The ref stepped in. Dustin raised a hand, trying to signal he was okay, but no one laughed anymore. Nora didn't approach. She stepped back to the legal distance. Gloves are still in position. Back straight, eyes calmly fixed on him. Not challenging, not pitying, just steady, like what had just happened was part of a routine. The ref asked if Dustin wanted to continue round two. He nodded, forced himself upright, face flushed. Sweat was running down his temple. He didn't look at Nora, but when he stepped forward this time, it was cautiously. Hands up, arms trembling slightly. Round two began. Dustin attacked faster, left jab, right low kick, underhand feint. He was trying to reclaim dignity, but Nora didn't strike back. She just dodged, precisely by centimeters. She didn't counter. She let him swing and made sure everyone saw not one hit landed. At second 48, as Dustin panted, his footwork slipping off axis, Nora threw a short, straight punch right to the edge of his jawline. Not hard, but precisely placed. And for the second time, Dustin collapsed. This time, unable to bounce up right away. The entire arena held its breath. The ref stepped in. The round was over. Nora stepped back, bowed with perfect form, and quietly left the ring. Before Dustin could even stand, no one was laughing after that technical showcase match. Dustin didn't leave the mat right away. He stood, stumbled silently, and walked toward the locker room. No eye contact, no words. A few small claps echoed from the corners of the bleachers, but even they faded as everyone realized they had just witnessed a shift in power, not through violence, but through absolute control. The live stream was cut early, but the clipped footage spread faster than the official post from Iron Pit. That evening, the match highlight was posted to Iron Pit's official page. In less than an hour, it passed 200,000 views. Comments flooded in like a wave. Who is this woman? That was textbook Aikido-level control. Did she just drop him? Twice? In a showcase respect. Nothing but respect. The next day, Combat Daily, a technical analysis column, wrote in just under 4 minutes. A woman who was most in the room had become the center of a lesson no one would forget, that strength isn't in the volume of your voice, but in the control of your silence. Nora didn't return to the gym the following week. She didn't post anything, didn't respond to podcast interview requests from 2 martial arts channels, didn't reply to emails from the head coach. She did exactly what she'd always done, showed up at the physical therapy center each morning, went home each evening, trained quietly at night, as if that match had never happened. And that, more than anything, made people reconsider. A week later, Iron Pit sent out an official email Dustin Craig would be stepping away from competition to recalibrate his role in the martial arts community. Below that was a brief apology, quoted from the head coach. What happened last Saturday reminds us all that respect is not optional. We failed to enforce that, and for that, we apologize. Publicly. 3 days after that, Nora received a private invitation to lead a new class called Precision Defense for Women. She didn't respond right away, but on Monday morning, she showed up during the trial time slot, carrying a box of new gloves, enough for 10 people. That day, 8 attended. 6 of them had once been bystanders during months of Nora being sidelined. One had laughed when Dustin called her auntie. No one brought it up, and Nora didn't need them to. She opened the class with a single line: "You're not here to be the strongest. You're here to understand what strength really means." Within 2 weeks, the class was full. One Friday afternoon, as everyone packed up, Nora was cleaning equipment when there was a soft knock at the door. It was Dustin. No robe, no entourage, just him, hair trimmed shorter, wearing an old hoodie, standing still with a water bottle in hand and an unfamiliar look in his eyes. The look of someone who had once stood on top, then been knocked down, and returned not to prove something, but to listen. "Can I come in?" he asked, voice low. Nora nodded, no questions. He stood for a moment, then said, "You had every reason to hurt me." "You didn't. That changed something." She didn't answer immediately. She just kept folding ankle pads, then looked up at him. "Calm strength isn't just what you throw, it's what you hold back." They stood there, 2 people once on opposite sides of a silent war, now with nothing more than needed to be said. Justice isn't always a gavel strike. It's a change that doesn't need an announcement. It's a man once full of swagger, now standing quietly at the back of a class, listening to a woman teach control. It's a room that used to echo with mocking laughter, now filled with the steady rhythm of focused training. And it's a woman once deemed out of place, now standing at the center of the mat, teaching others how to stand their ground, in the exact stance where she once fell, and rose again. Have you ever walked into a place and instantly felt that you weren't welcome? No words needed, just a look, a deliberate silence, a slight smirk, enough to tell you they've already decided who you are, before you've even said a word. Maybe it was the first meeting room you were ever invited into, and they assumed you were the one bringing coffee. Maybe it was the gym floor, where the bigger men didn't quite look at you, but somehow I was always blocked from training. Maybe you heard the phrase, "We need someone who's a better fit," or worse, "This place isn't for your kind." Nora didn't respond with outrage. She didn't need to shout, didn't need to call anyone out, explain her background, or flash credentials. She simply stayed, in silence, observing, and waited for the right moment to speak through her body, through her ethics, through the control of someone who doesn't need validation to have value. This story isn't about glorifying a knockout. It's a reminder that respect isn't a privilege reserved for the loudest voice or the flashiest presence. Respect begins when we stop judging others simply because they don't look like us. Maybe right now you're the one being underestimated. Or maybe you're standing on the sidelines, watching someone else being pushed out. Maybe you're teaching your kids about courage, but haven't asked, what will you do when you see someone smaller being shoved down? And maybe you've been Nora. If this story stirred something in you, drop a comment. You don't need to explain everything. Just a sentence, "I've been there," or "It's time we see people for who they are, not what they wear." And if you believe silence can carry strength, share this video with someone who needs a reminder. You're not invisible. You just haven't been seen by the right people yet. Thank you for watching. See you in the next story.